Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to offer Dana, then please do go to justthiszen.org/giving. Your support really does make a huge difference. Thank you so much.
It's lovely to welcome Trudy here this morning to give a Dharma talk entitled Between Fear and Love. Trudy.
Good morning, everyone. I was just sitting here as we were saying that last verse about taking refuge in Buddha and Dharma and Sangha, and I was feeling really grateful for Sangha, for our shared practice and how it helps me practice knowing that we do this so regularly, whether we're here or not. And there's something about that, the rhythm of knowing that you in, as it were, Sheffield meet on these mornings, and we meet in Lancaster. There's something about just knowing that rhythm is going on, whether or not I'm kind of plugged in. Just feels very supportive and nourishing to me. And I sort of feel like at the moment, in this time when I think we're being sort of called into increasing separation, increasing sense of possibly them and us, which, I think we have a natural human tendency to do. It's very normal for our nervous systems to want to feel safe and settled, and we tend to do that through familiarity and the known. And having a discriminating mind is part of our blessing and part of our curse. But I was just thinking, we seem to be living in a world that's moving sort of very starkly into them and us, and I was thinking, for quite a long time, it comes and goes like many of my practices. I'm a patchy practitioner. um, so steady in intention and very patchy in how I do it. But there was quite a long while where I would, if I'd gone into town, if I was walking around in particular, I would practice just like me. So that kind of just means looking at whoever you're close to or walking past and, thinking, busy just like me, or, connecting just like me, or tired just like me. Just to notice the way in which every single person that I could imagine was doing or feeling something just like I do, even if I'm not feeling it in that particular moment. I know the feeling, as we all do. We all share the same sort of human emotions. Um, and they manifest in different places and times, but there's all of that sort of sharing. So I was thinking about that practice of just like me, and then I read this quote by Ram Dass, and there was something about it, like something that suddenly feels really pithy and sort of on the money for me, and it was all the ways in which we are separate are rooted in fear. All the ways in which we are separate are rooted in fear. The dialogue in humanity is the dialogue between fear and love. The dialogue in humanity is the dialogue between fear and love. And for me, that's kind of like an intra-personal world, and also the world we share between us. So, the dialogue in me is about the dialogue between fear and love, and the dialogue between me and other humans is the dialogue between fear and love. And I think that what happens for many of us, both internally in our sitting practice and, in any meeting, in any connection, is we have so many deep fears, really deep, kind of in the bone fears, fears of not being good enough, of not belonging, of being found out, or sometimes it's the other end of those fears. I'm really special. What if nobody notices? What if if I'm really different, and I don't get seen for that? That there's all these fears. The famous Groucho Marx, I never want to belong to a club that'd have me. you know we have these sort of tremendous pulls between the yearning to belong and the fear of belonging, the yearning for intimacy and love and the fear of intimacy and love. So those, they're all there, I think, in all of us, and they're all there, and they certainly are for me in my sitting practice, and they are, as far as I can hear, in my psychotherapy practice. We're all subject to fear and longing and love. And so those for me feel like the very sort of crux of this issue of separation. So I wanted to read to you a poem. I'll be using some things that I'm sure you'll all know, but I'm hoping that good stories bear repetition. So this is the Khalil Gibran poem of the sea. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she travelled, from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages, and in front of her she sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear, because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear, because that's where the river knows it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. And when I think and feel about this fear, this fear of becoming something much greater than ourselves, which is what our sitting practice is an invitation to. There are several kinds of images and stories that have woven in me for quite a long time. And so I wanted, in my own kind of faltering attempts, to talk about this fear of separation, to talk about how do we talk about this kind of ineffable mystery. I initially, one of my first practices was within Hinduism. We lived in an ashram and we ran a Hindu meditation center, and we visited and stayed in a Hindu ashram in America. And in Hindu mythology, Shiva is seen as one of the chief gods of the Trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And it's often, Shiva is often seen as the transformer of the universe, representing the cycle of creation, preservation, and destruction. And many years ago, in a trip to Germany, while Joshua was away, he bought a beautiful statue of Shiva. And it was in the form of the dancing Shiva, and some of you may know it, and Shiva Nataraj, and Shiva is contained within this sort of great ring of fire of the whole of the universe. And So Shiva is dancing and within this flaming halo, and he holds in his right hand the drum that made the first sounds of the universe, and he holds in his left hand fire, the creation. And with his lower right hand, he's making the gesture that allays fear. But he's also standing on this little dwarf-like character. And it looks like his right foot is really trampling on it. And the little figure represents illusion, which leads mankind into suffering. And his other foot is raised and is about to come down. And the little figure is often shown clutching a snake, and the snake is kind of rearing back to bite the little figure and kill it. And the foot is raised and ready to come down, and it looks like it's kind of punishing. But actually, what the foot is doing is saying, let go. Let go, let go. But the little figure is clinging on to it's like, it's my snake, it's mine. And it's like, even though this thing which is going to lead us astray, cause us suffering, delusion, we cling so tightly to it because it's ours. There's something about that kind of definition of ours. And we hold on to it really, really tightly. And there's something about that knownness, that this thing that belongs to me, this definition of who I am, this familiarity with what we cling to, that seems to be, the very definition of who we are. And I used to practice a bodywork technique called polarity energetics, and the person coming to see me would lie, after we talked, they'd come and lie on the floor, and the first thing that I would do would be to sit behind them and cradle their head in my hands. And the first thing that we kind of did in that practice was to get the head sort of straight in the midline, so that their head was resting straight with their body. and everybody would say it felt weird. It's like, that's not straight anymore. It's like the sense of the familiarity with our imbalance, was what was so profound for people, that it was unfamiliar and therefore it felt wrong. And in our sitting practice, we're invited to sit upright, and there's something about that kind of uprightness, the uprightness of ceremony, not of discipline, not like we're sitting there like good boys and girls, but like, to inhabit the being of the Buddha that's already and always with us, is so powerful. And it can feel really wrong. And I know, I know I've got therapist head. Tilts all the time, and getting it straight and looking straight on is a really interesting practice for me, because I know I've got a kind of lean, a really habitual and familiar lean. So that's one of the things, that sense of like, the world is inviting us. It's not Shiva that's doing that, it's the world that says, let go, let go. Let go of this strongly held identity. And one of the other stories that really touches me is Flint has often told the story of the salt doll. And the first time, because Flint, with his wonderful American accent, someone once told me they thought it was a story of the salty dog as opposed to the salt doll. But anyway, the story is that a doll of salt, after a long pilgrimage on dry land, came to the sea and discovered something she had never seen and could not possibly understand. She stood on the firm ground, a solid little doll of salt, and saw there was another ground that was mobile, insecure, noisy, strange, and unknown. And she asked the sea, "But what are you?" And it said, "I'm the sea." And the doll said, "But what is the sea?" To which the answer was, "It's me." And so the doll said, "I cannot understand, but I really want to. How can I?" And the sea said, "Touch me, touch me." So the doll shyly put forward a foot and touched the water. And it was something that began to be knowable to her. And she withdrew her leg and looked down and saw that her toes had gone. And she was afraid and said, "Oh, but where's my toe? What have you done to me?" And the sea said, "You have given something in order to understand. You've given something in order to understand." And gradually the water took away small bits of the doll, of the salt, the doll's salt. And the doll went further and further into the sea, and at every moment she had a sense of understanding more and more and more, and yet of not being able yet to say what the sea was. As she went deeper, she melted more and more, repeating, "What is the sea? What is the sea?" And at last a wave dissolved the rest of her, and the doll said, "Oh, it's me. It's me." Something about immersing ourselves in this mystery and the sort of process of immersing is to both lose ourselves and find ourselves, to move away from this sense of solid self, solid I that's separate. It's like our essential nature is, if we let ourselves fully experience, to become fully ourselves, we become both less and more. It's a rather extraordinary sort of paradox. This sense of being made of something much bigger than ourselves and yet having our own particularity, I think is something that is both something we approach through our minds, but it's also the experience. It's that experience of letting go into the ocean of life. And there's another image which I often have inside of me, and it's related to something called shibori, which is a Japanese dyeing technique. And I love it because I love it for so many reasons, but partly because it's called resist dyeing. And I think of ourselves as resisting being dyed, it's like clinging to our sense of self is like we really resist being dyed. And the description of it is that the fabric is manipulated, folded, twisted, stretched and bound before dyeing to create intricate patterns. And the word shibori translates to wring, to squeeze, or to press in Japanese. And I'm just going to quickly show you a little picture of some shibori. No, doesn't want to do that one. It's this stuff here. There. This is a particular technique. There's lots of techniques in shibori, but that's one of them. And it results in these tiny little pockets. These really tiny little pockets. So the whole piece is dyed, but each little pocket is bound with thread, with cotton, to make tiny, tiny little pockets. And then when the threads are cut, the previously tightly bound fabric really takes the dye differently. And I think about our conditioning as being like the way that the threads are bound around us. We're all born with these things that kind of catch us separately, and they're tied really tight. And we're wrung or squeezed or pressed into the little shapes that we then see and experience ourselves of. As this is me, this little this the way that these threads have caught me are me, And I'm separate from all those other little tiny tied up parcels of fabric. Our sitting practice is a way of seeing, allowing us to see that we're all made from the same fabric. There is no separation. But the pattern we carry forward depends on the way we were bound. You know, we don't lose our conditioning. We don't lose the shapes we've become. We don't lose all of that. We just soften and see that we're part of the whole pattern of that. And we tend to think of our lives as so singular, so particular, but we're the result of, you know, I think it's like something like 6,000 people before us. That's usually one of the figures that's quoted. We carry the genetic inheritance of about 6,000 people. We are the result of the myriad things, you know, the 10,000 things. And of course, you know, this image is, you know, deeply flawed because, you know, we're not made out of a flat piece of fabric, you know, we're made out of the formless field of benefaction, you know, and there's many layers of dye and fabric inside of all of our, you know, we're not virgin material tied with our little particular bits of conditioning. We're the whole thing, we're the whole expression of the many lives that have got us here. But, you know, I think our steady sitting practice is what allows us to gradually soften, you know, and it can feel terrifying to loosen those bounds of conditioning. You know, it can really feel like we're going to lose ourselves. And of course we do. And of course we don't. And so that's the sort of paradox we dance with. And I think that the softening into the losing ourselves and the full expression of our sense can be caught for me in a particular little phrase. You know, our gift to the world is our genius loci. And genius loci means the spirit of place, referring to the unique atmosphere, character, and history that a location possesses. I have a genius loci. You have a genius loci. We all carry all of the impression, the sense of who we are. And so something about that particularity which is to be cherished and which is our gift to the world. And in our tradition, we talk a lot about emptiness, you know, which I think because of our Western connotations can often feel like being invited into a sort of null space, you know, emptiness, like blandness, nothingness. But actually, I think it's much more like the full expression of who we are, and a full expression of how true mind is being manifested in this life. The Genjo Koan, which I know you've been reading, says, you know, when you see forms or hear sounds fully engaging body and mind, you intuit Dharma intimately. When you see forms and hear sounds fully engaging body and mind, not from some empty place, not from somewhere that's devoid of something, but fully engaging body and mind, you intuit Dharma intimately. Fully engaged, no holding back. Fish swim the water, and however much they swim, there is no end to the water. Birds fly the sky, and however much they fly, there's no end to the skies. When we fully occupy ourselves without being bound by our conditioning, we move through the world without hindrance, leaving no trace. We live like a cloud in an endless sky, a lotus in muddy water, one with the pure mind of Buddha. It's not something you have to find. It's just something you have to let dance in the whole fabric. We go where we're called. We take form as a way of entering formlessness. Our beauty is born out of the mud and difficulty of our lives, and we're all of it. Water, mud, lotus, earth, sky, carrying the pattern we're born with, the pattern we make our lives with. At home, like a lotus, at home in the muddy water. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trudy, for such a rich talk. I felt really sort of drawn towards something, the unnameable. Really drawn towards that. Yeah. So we've got just a little bit less than a quarter of an hour to respond to Trudy, to all that richness.
I'm just sitting here looking at these little tiles and imagining them all like the little the little pieces of the shibori, like we're all here in our little individual pockets, all the same cloth.